What would happen if the deep sea rose to the surface right now? What if the pressure, the darkness, and the freezing water from the ocean floor suddenly exploded upward into our world? What if creatures that never see sunlight appeared beside your boat? What if the ocean released things we were never meant to meet? If the deep sea climbed up all at once, the results would be stranger and scarier than anyone expects. The deep ocean is a place of extreme darkness, cold and pressure, but have you ever imagined what our world would look like if everything trapped down there suddenly erupted upward? This part of the sea is so deep that sunlight cannot reach even 1% of it, and it hides creatures built for a world humans were never meant to enter. How would life on Earth react if this ancient, silent world rose up without warning? Pressure in the deep sea can be more than 1,000 times higher than at the surface. So what would happen if that pressure suddenly escaped into open water? At those depths, thick metal bends like soft clay and entire submarines can collapse in seconds. So if this much pressure suddenly rose through the ocean, could anything near the eruption survive even a moment? When extreme pressure is released all at once, water does not rise gently, so what kind of explosion would explode upward as it rushes toward the surface? Deep water would erupt like a massive underwater geyser, shooting upward with the force of a natural bomb. Could gigantic water columns rise so high that they crash down like towers made of liquid? As the deep sea shoots upward, something shocking happens to the water itself. So why would this icy black water suddenly begin to boil when it reaches shallow depths? The pressure drops so quickly that water instantly turns to vapor, creating boiling clouds beneath the wave. Would entire sections of ocean look like giant steaming craters as the sea releases its trapped pressure? These boiling zones form deadly pockets of vapor strong enough to drag objects downward. So how many boats around the eruption could vanish in minutes? The boiling water pulls downward with incredible force, swallowing anything caught above it. What would happen to anyone swimming nearby when the ocean turns into a boiling trap? But the water is not the only thing rising. So what would you do if deep sea creatures built for darkness suddenly appeared beside you in broad daylight? Many of these animals glow with eerie blue or green light and have transparent skin or needle-like teeth. How would these fragile bodies react when sunlight and low pressure hit them all at once? Deep sea organisms cannot survive long at the surface. So what horrifying sight would unfold as they begin to collapse or burst apart? Their bodies are engineered for crushing pressure, not warm, open air. Would entire clouds of glowing creatures melt, pop, or dissolve into jelly as the surface destroys them? But exploding creatures are not the biggest threat. So what happens when deadly gases from the seabed suddenly shoot upward too? The deep ocean holds enormous pockets of methane and hydrogen sulfide trapped beneath layers of mud and sand. Could these gases blast into the air and create toxic clouds drifting across the water? Hydrogen sulfide is strong enough to kill in a breath. So what would happen if a giant cloud of this gas formed over the ocean and moved toward the coast? The gas smells like rotten eggs and drops animals instantly. How many people could escape if the ocean released a poisonous fog thicker than smoke? Methane is lighter than air and spreads quickly. So what happens when a massive methane burst removes oxygen from the atmosphere around it? The gas can blanket miles of ocean surface and drift toward coastal towns. How many creatures would collapse simply because the air around them no longer had enough oxygen to breathe? As cold, deep water rises, it slams into warm surface water. So what kind of underwater shock would this collision create across the ocean? The ocean depends on warm and cold layers staying separate, so mixing them violently breaks natural systems. Would underwater walls of force race outward and hit coastlines like invisible tidal waves? When shockwaves hit the coast, waves grow quickly to dangerous heights. So what kind of mega tsunami would rise if deep sea water flooded upward too fast? Some waves could reach heights never recorded in human history. Could entire ports, islands, and beaches disappear under walls of water taller than skyscrapers? But the rise does not stop at the coast. So how would Earth's weather react when deep cold water spreads across the surface? The ocean controls global temperature, storms, and wind, and flipping its layers breaks everything. Would hurricanes grow far stronger as the ocean loses its carefully balanced heat engine? The deep sea also hides methane hydrates frozen inside icy crystals. So what would happen if these ice structures melted and released massive waves of methane into the atmosphere? These hydrates store more methane than all surface reserves combined. Could a fast release of methane heat Earth's atmosphere faster than any natural event in history? Buried deep in the mud are ancient bacteria that humans have never encountered. So what happens when these microbes rise to the surface after millions millions of years in darkness. Some bacteria thrive in boiling vents or toxic pits, living in conditions deadly to most known life. Could these ancient organisms survive long enough in our world to create new biological threats? As layers mix, the surface becomes a chaotic battlefield. So how would marine life react when temperature, oxygen, and salt levels flip instantly? Fish would flee in confusion, coral reefs would bleach, and plankton, the base of the food chain, would collapse. Could the entire ocean food web crash like a collapsing tower? When the food chain breaks, ecosystems collapse fast. So what kind of global impact would follow as millions of sea creatures die in days? Dead zones would expand, oxygen levels fall, and warm currents fail. Could entire stretches of coastline lose all marine life almost immediately? The surface would transform into something unrecognizable. So what would you think if dark water, steam clouds, glowing organisms, and toxic smells filled the sea around you? The ocean would look like a strange world made of boiling pits, drifting debris, and collapsing life. Would beaches become covered with strange remains carried up from the deep? Satellites watching from space would show wild temperature swings. So what happens when some parts of the ocean appear colder than ice while others heat up rapidly? Weather models would fail, storm paths would shift, and clouds would form in strange patterns. How would pilots react to dangerous turbulence forming over unstable ocean zones? Even after the first eruption ends, the ocean does not calm quickly. So how long would it take for warm and cold layers to return to normal? Deep water would sit on top, warm water would sink, gases would spread unevenly. Could the ocean remain unstable for months or even years? With warm currents broken, climate patterns begin to shift dramatically. So what kind of extreme weather events would appear across the globe? Some regions could freeze while others burn under extreme heat. How many farmlands and forests could survive these sudden transformations? Fish migrations would fail, coral reefs would die, and jellyfish swarms might explode. So what surprising species would take over the ocean after the chaos settled? With predators gone, simple organisms like jellyfish could dominate vast areas. Would the ocean turn into a world of drifting jelly blankets? Eventually the ocean would begin to settle again. So what long-term damage would remain after the deep sea returns to its normal place? Water layers would slowly stabilize, gases fade, and heat rebalance. But life would be changed forever. Could some species vanish forever because the ocean flipped for only a short moment? Even though a complete rise is nearly impossible, smaller versions have already happened. So what lessons can we learn from lakes in Africa that flipped over and released deadly gas clouds? Entire villages were wiped out in minutes. Could the ocean create a disaster thousands of times larger? The deep sea is a world of crushing pressure, freezing darkness, and ancient life. So why would mixing it with the surface create results more terrifying than any storm or earthquake we have ever seen? Everything about the deep sea is different from our world above. Would Earth ever be the same if the deepest waters were allowed to rise? Some mysteries are safer left untouched. So what would happen if humans ever tried to force the deep sea upward or disturb its layers with technology? The deep holds secrets, dangers, and history older than life on land. Should this world remain hidden far below the surface, where it has rested for millions of years?